Issues. He's John McCulloch.
And welcome into the Tuesday session of the John McCulloch Show here on FM 92.7, AM 1400, The Patriot. Glad you could join us. There's a lot going on in the news today, but in an effort to keep you folks on the cutting edge, I'm going to bring up something that is going to be on the front page very, very shortly in many communities across the country. As more and more immigrants pour into quiet little towns, the demographics begin to change. In rural Washington, D.C., right now, there are 165,000 people from El Salvador. For some reason, they have kind of migrated to that area, and as the illegals come in, they're bringing busloads in to that area. You know, there's some nice little towns around Virginia and around Washington, D.C., and it changes things. And cases like the one we're going to discuss right now are going to become more and more frequent. In Texas, a middle school principal made the announcement over the intercom that it would be best if students only spoke English in the classroom. She was figuring that, well, you know, these kids they're going to have to take tests in English. Plus, when they talk amongst themselves, which they really shouldn't do in class, but they do, and they speak in Spanish and the teacher can't understand them, they could be saying just about anything. So she made that request. By the time it got to the mainstream media, that being the Houston Chronicle and KHOU in Houston, she had banned the speaking of Spanish anywhere on the campus at Hempstead Middle School. That's not what she did. But the worst part about it is she lost her job. She was fired for making the suggestion. Even though she told them what she really said, the students started to scream racism, and that was all it took, and she was fired. Robert Vandervoort is executive director of ProEnglish. His organization is the largest one in the country, as I understand it, that is pushing for the adoption of English as the official language of the United States, as it is right now in Texas, by the way. And he joins us now on our Newsmaker line. Robert, thanks for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me, John. It's great to be here.
Tell us real quickly, what is ProEnglish's mission and when was it founded and so forth?
Sure. Well, we've been an organization for over 20 years. We have members in all 50 states of the country, and we basically support making English the official language for the federal government. We also support making it official at the state and local level as well. And essentially, this would do two things. One, it would help cut down on unnecessary translation costs. People wouldn't be able to demand government services in multiple languages. And number two, and maybe more importantly, it encourages assimilation, which is what this country has been founded on. And I think as this example of Amy Lacey proves, we're getting away from that. We're getting towards this multicultural, bilingual atmosphere, which is not going to do anything to help these people, and it's certainly not helping Americans who are just law-abiding taxpayers.
We're talking with Bob Vandervoort. He is the executive director of ProEnglish, and if you would like to get involved in our conversation, we're talking about the Amy Lacey case, a principal in Texas who was fired for suggesting that English should be spoken in the classrooms, and that was all it took, and she's gone. Now, she is suing, but I don't know how much of a leg she has to stand on, and except the fact that it is the official language of Texas. I've talked to other people from other organizations, Bob. What makes ProEnglish different from the other organizations that are pushing for the same thing?
Well, John, I would say one of the big things that we're sets us apart from other groups that work on English issues, official English, is we do get involved in litigation. We do go to courts to defend people, and I do actually have to correct you on one thing, that Texas does not have English as its official language yet, and it's one of 19 states that does not. So it's something your listeners can check out on our website, proenglish.org. We've got a list of all the states that have official English. Had it been the law in Texas, that would be something that would be helping her right now.
I appreciate your correcting me. I got that from a Houston Chronicle article, and so I should have known better.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact that the Houston Chronicle is saying, basically implying that she banned Spanish when we know the facts say otherwise, it shows how reliable that report is. But yeah, we get involved in lawsuits, and in fact, we're involved in a lawsuit in Arizona right now, which is the flip side of Amy Lacey's case. In fact, we reached out to the principal, Amy Lacey, and she informed us that she's already being represented by attorneys, so she didn't need our assistance. But in Arizona, we're representing a nursing student named Terry Bennett, and here you have the example of a student who was finding it very difficult to learn because all of her classmates around her were speaking in other languages. And when she got assigned to student labs, she was often the only English speaker in the classroom. And she went to the school and said, hey, I wish you could encourage people to speak English so I can learn. And because of that, the bureaucrats at her school at Pima Community College in Tucson called her a racist and a bigot and gave her a 9-month suspension. And she came to us seeking help, and we're taking the school to court because, fortunately, Arizona is one state that does have an official English law, and we can use that in our lawsuit against the school. But I think it's both of these cases are illustrative of the climate that's emerging, which is very hostile to assimilation, to learning English, and it's very troubling.
We're talking with Bob Vandervoort. He is the executive director of Pro-English, a group of people that is actively pushing for and defending the use of English and trying to get it made the official language of the federal government. If you'd like to get involved in our conversation, I know we do have callers standing by. We do have room for you, 800-923-9385. That's 800-923-WDTK. I promise to get to the calls in a minute. As you know, your questions are always much more important than mine. The thing that bothers me about this, Bob, is that, you know, the people of the United States value and respect diversity, and I do. I also believe in assimilation, and when I suggest that, or when I suggest things that just don't even come close to being racism, the first thing people do is drop that racism card, and it's a tough one. It's a tough one to combat because they believe it, I think. What can we do as we push for English as the official language to counter that?
Well, I think the one thing that we can do is be assured that the majority of Americans support making English the official language. The majority of people, what used to be called the silent majority, they actually support our positions. It's only an extremely vocal group of agitators that call and holler about racism and that sort of thing. And in fact, I suspect in Amy Lacey's part of Texas, if you ask most, in fact, I would even imagine most of the Hispanic parents probably would be supportive of her wanting the students to learn English. It's probably, as usually is the case, just a bunch of very vocal, a tiny vocal group of activists who stir the pot and smear people. And really, if you just stand up to them, you know, you'll succeed.
I hate to cite anything from the UN because I think the organization should be thrown out of the United States and go somewhere else. But that said, an awful lot of the UN countries have adopted English as their official language, have they not?
They have. As a matter of fact, again, I refer your listeners to our website at ProEnglish.org. We have a list of all the countries that have adopted English as their official language. Many of them are in African countries. And in fact, 90% of the world's countries have at least one language designated their official language. So America is actually kind of out of step because we're one of the few countries that hasn't declared an official language.
We have a priest he's moved on, but he was from Cameroon, and I asked him, I said, how do you speak English so well when it's so different from what your native language is? And he says, my native language is English. That's what we speak. And I was kind of shocked with that. Let's go to the phones and get some ideas from some of our listeners. Our telephone number, 800-923-9385. That's 800-923-WDTK. Stick to the subject, if you will, please. Sean in Sterling Heights, you're first here on The Patriot with Robert Vandervoort. Go ahead.
John, Robert, thanks for taking my call. If you go to Myers and they have signs that are in both languages, to me that seems like they assume that there are illegal shopping in those areas. in their their stores, or whatever store has dual language signs or bilingual signs. They're supposed to assimilate to our culture, our language, so that would almost indicate that they're illegal, and they know it.
Well, in defense of Target and Meijer and some of these other stores, we do have a rather large and really kind of a neat Mexican community right here in Detroit. And,
absolutely. I'm in the service industry. I work with a lot.
Well, then that it doesn't necessarily mean that there are illegals, but we know there are. So let's tell it as it is. We know that. But let's ask Robert this. Robert, if you get into the situation where you've got stores, big chains like Target, that have to go to the expense of doing multilingual signs, that's going to affect the price of products eventually, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great question, John, and with the caller there, I think that it's indicative of where we are as a nation in our culture, that we're more and more translation costs are being put in, not just at the government level, but also in the private sector. And I think that one of the reasons why we push so hard to make English our official language is it would send a signal that assimilation is the way to go, and hopefully the corporate America would take note of that and do their job when it comes to promoting assimilation in this country.
I have to take a break. Can you stick with me through the break for a few more calls?
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay. We're talking with Robert Vandervoort. He is Executive Director of ProEnglish. Their website is proenglish.org. I have it posted on my Facebook page, and you can go there and you can link directly to their organization. They want to make English the official language of the United States, as do I. We're talking about the case of the school principal in Texas who's been fired from her job for suggesting that only English be spoken in the classrooms, not the campus, but just in the classrooms. And we'll take your calls as we continue with